little donkey. Do not be afraid, daughter of Zion. See, your king is coming, seated on a donkey's colt. It had been the most glorious day of the little donkey's life. Always he had been pointed at, laughed at, because he had been born the wrong color. That was it, nothing more, nothing less. Quite simply, he had been born the purest white, and donkeys were not supposed to be that color. In the few short months that he had spent with his mother, she had told him that he was special, a special colt for a special purpose. He had asked his mother what that purpose was. Sadly, she had told him that she did not know, but that he was always to remember that he was special. Then he had been dragged away from his mother, dragged by hard men with hard hands and even harder souls. He had called out to his mother, asked her to never forget him, and she had replied that she never would. Both of them knew that they would never see one another again, and they never had. After that, all he had known was the ridicule of the finger-pointers. A donkey should never be pure white, they had said. What use was a pure white donkey? Certainly none that they could think of. So life had not been easy for the little donkey. Many times he had wished that he had not been born special, that he could have been born an ordinary donkey that was brown, gray, or russet, any color but white. He had heard the cruel names that they had called him: milksop, white face. These were but a few, for there were many others that were harder and crueler. What was the point of being special if you didn't know why you had been born special? He was special. He knew that, his mother had told him so, and he believed her completely, even though she was now little more than a distant memory to him, and he struggled to recall her face and gentle touch. This was not a world that treated donkeys well. Too often the donkeys were overburdened so that they could barely stagger, let alone walk, with the weight that they were expected to carry or to drag behind them. Cruel whips were used to thrash the donkeys to an even greater effort than was possible, and often donkeys fell down, dead before they even hit the ground, their hearts having given out at the unbearable strain that had been placed upon them. The little donkey had seen all of this and had wished many times that it was he that was lying so still upon the ground, with the flies already settling on the carcass before it was even cold. Then the birds would come, the little donkey knew, and it was the eyes that they would go for first. The dead eyes that had once shone with such excitement and joy when they had first opened onto the world that they had been born into. All that had been lost as they had learnt the truth of the cruelty and the pain that existed in this once Eden. And so it was that the little donkey had wished so many times that he could die and leave his pain behind. There had been times when his pure white coat had been stained with angry red stripes by the blood that ran hot and freely from the biting whips of the hard and cruel men. Was this what it was to be special? The little donkey had asked himself that so many times. To be born with a coat of the color of pure driven snow so that the wounds that were inflicted on him would show so clearly? And then, one day, all this had changed. The little donkey had heard a whisper of a man who was a prophet, a man who was more than a prophet, a man who had been seen to walk on water, and more than that, a man who could cast out demons and raise the dead so that, once more, they spoke and walked amongst their loved ones. This man, this prophet, the little donkey knew was special also. What the little donkey had yet to realize was just how special this man was. There had been tales of more strange occurrences that many believed to be miracles. This man was special, for it was told, and many had witnessed the fact how he had fed 5,000 people with just 5 small loaves and 2 fishes. It should not have been possible, but this was what had truly happened. Thousands had seen and had described it as being as great a miracle as that of Moses when he had called down manna from heaven itself. And yet the little donkey had heard other rumors. Whispers of other men, so-called great and learned men, men called the Pharisees and Sadducees, who taught in the great temple of Jerusalem. It was whispered, but never spoken out loud, that these men hated this new prophet, hated him for the threat that he brought against them. These great and learned men had never been seen to heal or to perform miracles, but they sought to condemn a man who had brought the dead back to life. What more proof did these great men need? The little donkey wondered that this man, this prophet, was special. It was then that they had come for the little donkey. At first he had been scared, but he soon realized that these were not the usual hard men with their hard hands. These men were a gentler breed. men who did not shout and swear, but spoke with a lowered and kinder voice. They had exclaimed joyously about the pure whiteness of the little donkey, and they had washed his coat so that it shone just as it had in the all too short days that he had spent with his mother. They had called the little donkey special, just as his mother had done, and they had spoken the word in the same odd manner. Here, they had said, was the donkey that had been born to carry the Savior, the Messiah, into Jerusalem. Only a donkey that was of the purest white was fit to carry the Son of Man who was free from all sin. Then the little donkey had met the man, the prophet, the man who had performed so many miracles. And the little donkey had recognized immediately that this man was far more than a prophet. He was in fact the Son of Man, the Son of the living God. The little donkey then knew why he had been born to perform this task, why he had been born as pure a color as there ever could be. He had been born so that on one glorious day he might carry on his back the Messiah into Jerusalem. Never had the little donkey seen such happiness and joy. The crowds had come in their thousands to see this man, this Savior who sat upon the back of the donkey of the purest white. They had thrown cloaks onto the little donkey's back for the Messiah to sit upon, and yet the little donkey had felt no extra weight from them. Then the procession had begun. It had seemed that there were people everywhere, calling out with laughter and strewing the way before the Messiah and the little donkey with palm leaves. Yet in the midst of all this excitement and happiness, the little donkey had sensed a great loneliness and sadness in the man who sat upon his back. It was as if he knew a terrible grief that would fall upon him, even in this time of such rejoicing. Even so, the little donkey had pricked up his ears and taken every step with a great show of pride and dignity. He knew that he alone had been chosen to carry the Son of Man upon his back, and that no other animal or even human being had ever been granted such an honor, and never would again. They had parted company at the great temple of Jerusalem, the little donkey and the Son of Man, and yet they had both known that they would meet again, but under very different circumstances. The Messiah had placed his hand on the little donkey's neck for one last time, and the little donkey had felt such a feeling of great joy and peace at that touch as he knew that he would never experience again. Then the Messiah was walking up the temple steps. For a moment he seemed to blaze in the brilliance of the sunlight, and then was lost to sight in the gloom of that dark and foreboding temple. The little donkey never knew what truly happened. It seemed that those who should have welcomed, should have embraced the Son of God, had not done so. They most certainly had not. Instead, they had turned into his implacable enemies. Why this should be the little donkey did not know, would never understand. Just as he had been born of the purest white, so the little donkey recognized that the man who he had carried in that glorious procession into Jerusalem that now seemed to be so long ago but was in reality only a few short days, was also of the purest white, for he was the Messiah, the Son of God. Why could they not recognize this? The little donkey wondered. After all, he was only a donkey. Why was it that he could understand this, and yet the very people that the Savior had come to save had turned their backs on him? Could they not feel the goodness in the man? The little donkey asked himself. Had they not witnessed the miracles? What more could they possibly want? They should not have needed proof to believe, but this man, this Jesus Christ, had provided all the proof that they should ever have needed. Had he not raised the dead, caused the blind to see, walked upon the water and stilled the storm? Then the terrible news had come. First it had come as only a whisper, then as a shout. The Son of Man, the Messiah, had been taken before Pontius Pilate in chains. This ruler should have sensed something holy in the man who stood before him, and indeed it was said that he had not wished to condemn this innocent man to death. It had been the Pharisees and the Sadducees who had called for the Savior's death. So determined were they to see this man dead, that even when Pontius Pilate had offered to spare either the robber Barabbas or Jesus Christ, these temple elders had howled like demented wolves that this so-called Messiah should die. So reluctantly and symbolically washing his hands free of guilt, Pontius Pilate had succumbed to the wolves and had passed sentence on an innocent man. Crucify. The very word sent shivers through the little donkey's being. That a man should be nailed to a wooden cross seemed, to the little donkey, to be the cruelest death imaginable, to hang there ridiculed, thirsty, broken, and dying. The little donkey wished that he could take the place for the Son of God, but he knew that he could not, Crucifixion was only reserved for human beings by other human beings. It was not for donkeys. Then came the ultimate horror, the ultimate betrayal, and the little donkey could not believe what he saw with his own eyes. There was the Messiah struggling to carry his huge wooden cross through the streets of Jerusalem to the place of skulls, to Golgotha. They had put a crown of thorns on the head of the Son of God, so that his red blood ran down his face, mixing with his sweat and tears. He had fallen, and it seemed that none would help him, but at last there had been one, but only one, who had stepped forward to help the Son of God. Then the horrible sight. 3 wooded crosses standing stark against the lowering sky. In the middle of this terrible tableau hung the Messiah, the Son of God, who had come only to help and to purify the world. This was how the world had thanked him. They had crucified him, in spite of all the miracles that he had performed. In spite of all that they had seen and heard from the Son of God, they had crucified him. He had died, this Son of God, this healer and worker of miracles. With one great cry, he had given up his spirit to his Father and had died. The skies had turned as dark as if it was the middle of the night, and a great voice had rung out, and then it was over. The Son of God had left the world, and the world was poorer for it. It was bereft. He had been born of the purest white, this little donkey, for only he had been destined to make that great journey, as he had carried the Messiah over the palm leaves and into Jerusalem. He had hated for many years the fact that he was different. Now he realized, knew why he was special, and he would not have changed his coat of pure white for anything in the world. Eventually he had died, this little donkey of the purest white color. But this was not the end for him. It is not often, in fact only once every 500 years, that he is seen once more. There, for only the shortest of time, on the Mount of Skulls, on Golgotha, can be seen the donkey of the purest white, gazing up at the place where the Son of Man, the Savior, had died. Then the white figure of the little donkey would fade away. In time it would be forgotten that this was the little donkey, the same little donkey of the purest white coat that had carried the Son of God into Jerusalem, and the world would be the poorer place for the loss of this knowledge. Author's notes. Anyone interested in the welfare of donkeys can find a great deal of excellent information from the Donkey Sanctuary. They do outstanding work all around the world in the protection, rescue, and well-being of donkeys.